So what's a real boundary and what's a fake boundary? Like, how do I know if I am uh setting a boundary from like my ego place and uh rather than like actually taking care of myself and my inner child, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, something comes to me right off the bat that I really want to talk about. So we can just at least start there.
Mhm.
Most people with bad, stupid boundaries who think they have good boundaries have reasons attached. So if, for example, you give money to someone you know and you feel good, was that within your boundaries? Was that a real boundary or a fake boundary? Interesting, right? It's
Right.
really interesting because, like, was it the pleasure of their pleasure? Was it the pleasure of some sort of social, now you were up socially somehow, right? Like, what was the pleasure? Or,
Mhm.
and so what is a ego-based boundary versus like a real boundary? Honestly, I go back to the baby or the donkey. Would the baby or the donkey have as much pleasure giving that money to that person as you did right there?
I don't care.
Yeah, like, the baby might have some kind of pleasure in giving the money, but it doesn't really understand what it's doing, so it's just the act of interacting. They could have given a dirty lollipop to the person and had just as much pleasure. So, are you interacting with the person with joy, and you found, like, a rock on the ground and you called it a shark's tooth, like, "I'm giving you a shark's tooth," you know?
Yeah, okay.
So right? So you can see how stacked it was, that the pleasure of giving the money had nothing to do with your boundaries and everything to do with some sort of weird ego trip based on the power dynamics of the situation and social hierarchy, blah, 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 right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But there could be pleasure in giving money, in my opinion, and this is just what I'm saying for right now, is just the interaction of giving something to someone else's hand like a
Yeah.
baby. Yeah.
But it's not necessarily if the pleasure comes from, oh well, I'm better off than this person and I'm going to give them this money and now that makes me look good in the eyes of whoever the hell, that's a fake boundary. That's a
That is extraordinarily egotistical.
Yeah. It's
That is
extremely.
extraordinary egotistical.
Yeah, okay. I think, yeah, I understand. Makes a lot of sense. um can I ask another question?
Sure. And I'll say one more thing about that. And remember this second question. So, what's a fake boundary versus a real boundary? The fake boundary usually has something to do with social gain.
Hmm.
The fake boundary usually has something to do with your placement in society and hierarchy and power dynamics. And in an exchange that is noticeable on that level, a real boundary has nothing to do with that. Even overeating Magnum ice cream bars, okay? Like, you're like, "Oh, that's just me with me." Well, that's sort of a separate subject, but would you have felt this overwhelming need to eat that much stuff if it weren't for something that was probably triggered by how you feel in the context of a social situation probably, you know? Even if you're by yourself at home, you probably feel shame. You
Yeah.
probably feel fear or something like that. And it doesn't come from you being at home by yourself. It has to do with your idea of yourself in the situation that you're in at large.
Hmm.
Then you deserve the
Right.
Magnum ice cream bars or whatever. Okay. So
I
what
see.
was your second question?
um how do I let go of like this need to social climb, or even because I feel like I have this dilemma where I want to like just exist as me, but my ego has been like so convenient to me being successful, that it's hard to let that go. And part of me is like, well, I should just destroy the life that I've built upon my ego. But maybe the egotistical part of me is like, well, that's not so easy. Or like, you can't just drop everything that, you created from your ego, I guess.
Like, what's wrong with social climbing?
I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but it's that I mean, like eating the Magnum ice cream bars. I guess part of me is like, well, I could just stop, or
What's wrong with overeating Magnum ice cream bars?
nothing's wrong with that, I guess, unless your ego identifies with, I guess your ego is the part of you that says, oh, I'm such a slob for eating a whole box of Magnum ice cream bars, even though no one cares.
Is there any way to get to the heart of this question without the concept of right or wrong?
I don't know. I guess part of me, it must be personal, the concept of right and wrong. But I don't know. I know there's definitely like universal like laws and all of that, but I'm like, I don't necessarily understand those, or I couldn't write them on a piece of paper and give them to you if those are real. I don't know.
I feel like you're asking a really deep question about like how to be yourself morally and survive in society. You're asking something quite deep. It
Yeah,
feels like.
that's a good question. How do I be myself within my boundaries and within my own moral compass, and also live in the material world? How do I do that?
Oh, that's the game of life.
Oh my goodness, yeah,
That's the
yeah.
game of life. You know what's really interesting is like very broadly, flatly speaking, so generically, most people who are, let's say, spiritual or awake or whatever term you want to use that indicates these special people who are aware of things, their moral compass usually goes against society's habits. So in many ways, it's really hard to be in society if you follow your own personal moral compass, because the moral compass of society is wrong.
Yeah.
So that's like a generic problem that is like a man versus society type of story conflict that almost everyone has.
Mhm.
So it's almost boring. It's almost boring because to me, okay, like to me, you don't have to agree with this, but it's like there's only so many conflicts that we can have in this kind of dimension. And there's like inner conflict, okay? Man versus man, or man versus himself, okay? The inner conflict, external conflict, man versus man, okay? You versus one other person. And then man versus society, okay? You versus many other people who are separate from you. And then man versus nature. That's like it. That's it. So like, how do you follow your own moral compass and live in society is just a flavor of like man versus society, which is a
Okay.
type of conflict that human stories have, and you're a human, so you will have all of these conflicts that I just mentioned,
Mhm.
which by the way are like core types of stories you can have. So
Uh-huh.
I'm talking from a storytelling perspective, but I'm like crossing it over into the spiritual thing.
I see.
Does this make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay, so I'll just say, even if it does make sense, I'll just say one more time. So, like, I just said that there are four kinds of stories, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm saying those four kinds of stories, those four kinds of conflicts, those are the only four really that are possible. You, as a human, you will experience all four. And you as a spiritual person will experience all four in your kind of way. And so
Okay.
the question you're asking is just one of those four. And so I'm like, oh, everyone has that.
Yeah.
It's
So
just
it's
like,
just
hmm,
normal, basically.
yeah, like the to me, you are an idea that needs a whole lifetime and or story to express.
Okay.
So all those conflicts only help to define you.
I see. Okay. Interesting.
Yes, and you need definition in order to be you, right? Because otherwise you just go back in the soup of void source, right? Oneness with all. So if you want to differentiate yourself and like come out and be a very specific thing, which is you for the time being, you need lots of definition. And all these kinds of conflicts help define you.
Okay.
So there's no like, well, if you do this, you solve that conflict. There's nothing like that,
Okay.
because you living that out in your whole lifetime is your story, is your definition of you,
Okay.
is the
Okay.
expression of the idea of you.
Interesting. Okay. So, like, am I not even, or anybody, you're not even supposed to like reach a point where it's like, now I can be, you know, now this conflict is over. Like it's an ongoing.
Oh
Or
my God,
it's
that's
like
so
now,
funny.
now I'm done and I can just sit in my house and I don't know, paint, pet my cat and shit, you know?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Okay, this is how I'm going to take your question. This may not be what you had in mind, but this is what I think. Everything is a pattern. Reality is a pattern. Energy forms and dissolves and plays in pattern. So one way to look at it is when this universe ends, it just starts right back up again the exact same way.
Mhm.
Um, when your story ends, let's say the idea is, and you don't have to agree with this, but like when your story ends, you go back to source and you start a story all over again, whether it's this story or a different story. But as you can see, almost all stories are the same story: man versus himself, man versus man, man versus society. And until you start switching up dimensions and stuff, then it's going to be different kinds of things. But in the way that you and I are accustomed to perceiving things, there's only so many stories. There's only so many patterns. Um, I want to say this. I'm squeezing it in. This may not really fit here, or it may because it comes to mind. But I want to say this to you. Okay, so like this is how I see things. Let's say I have a box.
Mm.
Okay, and in this box I have one vibration, and the vibration goes from top to bottom. It goes like dut, 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 dut. It just keeps doing that for in perpetuity. Dut, 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 dut. That's the box. That's the vibration. That's it. That's all it holds. Well, to make things a little bit interesting, why don't I put a perpendicular kind of vibration, and it has a slightly different pattern? So it goes, okay. So now you have dit, 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 and I can't even do it. So you have like two vibrations in this box. That's universe. That's a universe with two vibrations. And they will do that in perpetuity, right? Like just, and this box, this universe has like so many more vibrations. You're a vibration, I'm a vibration, the wall is a vibration, so many more vibrations, but it is a box of vibrations that are doing their patterns. And this is personally how I see conflict. And like this is very, very simplified, of course, but like if you throw a rock in there, it's going to be like right,
Right.
and the vibrations can't do what they usually did. But if you do nothing, just do nothing, over time they will just reassert themselves. Doot, 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 doot. They will just like just like spit out the rock by just being themselves.
I see.
And by having with the rock, and the process of staying true to themselves, and eventually ejecting the rock through just being their normal thing, they're like, wow, this is what it's like to feel me again.
Mhm.
And
Interesting.
that's like humans. And that's why you have conflict. And that's why you have man versus himself, man versus man versus society, man versus nature. Those are just in quotation marks rocks that help define you.
Okay. That
So
makes sense.
yeah, and so when you're like, is there any time where I just like, have a porch and sit with my cat and everything's like copacetic? Like that's probably the end of your pattern. And then guess what's going to happen again?
Go back into the void and come back as, I don't know, a tree or something.
Yeah, with other conflict.
Yeah.
As long as that's the story you want to tell. Like I don't know if I don't think trees necessarily have the kind of minds that we do where there's like conflict. But anyway,
Or
like
whatever happens. I mean, I'm not married to that concept of reincarnation, or I don't know, I don't know.
but like to me, this is what I see. It's just literally what I see, that when you solve the problem, it's literally game over and you start the exact same problem all over again. That's what
Mhm.
I literally see. So that's why I see people with really, really intense problems, like where what we're talking about here is, well, what I'm talking about here is like your ego is all you know. Your true self is in your shadow. You have no idea what's in your shadow, but you feel it, and when it's reflected back to you in society, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, but I feel shamed of that, like that's like everyone's problem. And everyone has their Gordian knot of who they are. And as soon as you solve it, you start again. That's what I see. It's just the box of energy with the exact same vibrations doing their thing. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just how I see things.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, basically, we like come here to be humans to have conflicts and problems. Is that kind of
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is, we're not, I mean, I don't know if this is embedded in your question, but this is what I feel is like, it doesn't matter because when you go back, all of this really, really feels like nothing. You need a lot of this friction in order to feel something, in my opinion. You need a lot of friction to feel something. So you ever like have one of those days where you're like, you're late for the bus, but maybe you're able to get onto it and then your payment doesn't work. And then you rip your clothes and like it's just like someone else's coffee spills on you. It's just like one of those days. You just like
yeah.
hate life. As a human ego, you probably feel very threatened and really upset and all this kind of stuff. But in my opinion, the like vibrational you that's completely safe, that is not human, that's the very thing that like anchors you on earth and keeps you in this reality, or else you just vibrate out of here because this stuff really is not real, is really
Yeah.
not real. You ever get bored of a video game, you just stop playing it and turn it off?
Yeah.
It's that simple, actually.
Just stop playing and turn it on. Well, yeah, that's a part of my difficulty because I'm like, well, this isn't like I have trouble almost taking the real world seriously. Like, somebody asked me, like, oh, what do you want to do after college? I'm like, I don't know. And to other people, that's like, oh, God, you poor thing. You don't know what you want to do after college. But I'm like, it doesn't. I'm wondering, I don't know, maybe this ties back into the inner child stuff, like how to feel like the knowledge that Earth is kind of just a game and it's not real, but also being able to somewhat take it seriously is kind of hard for me. I'm wondering if there's a balance between those two things or not. I don't know.
Your aura is glowing really white as you say that.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
I know.
What
Mm,
is this is a what does my white aura mean? Can I ask you that, or is that not relevant at all?
I
I'm
don't
just so
care to answer that
curious.
right now.
Okay, cool.
um, I don't know if I care to answer your last question either.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because I feel like saying this, no matter what the energy is behind what I'm about to say, there is no problem to solve.
Okay. Is believing there's a problem to solve part of the ego? Like, does the ego want there to be a, the ego wants there to be that problem to solve? Or I don't know. Maybe I'm just asking BS questions now.
It's hard for me to answer yes or no questions. So like if you just asked, is it the ego that wants there to be a problem to solve? I would have to say yes or no, and that's not quite right. So
Okay.
for me, but it's more like the question I would reword that to be would be, what creates the feeling that there is a problem to solve?
Okay. Yeah. What does create that feeling that there's a problem to solve?
That's a good question. We're really going out there, huh? All right. So I'll just say this for today. This is not the end all be all answer. And
Mhm.
I may change my answer over time. Okay. So this is just this is what I'll just say for today. What I feel is all those things, like earlier I was like alluding, or I was talking about, those shitty days where everything goes wrong and you feel very, very victim and you feel like really just upset and stuff. Man, I'm like, that keeps you here. It keeps you from flying off into space. It keeps you from leaving your body. It keeps you human. And I do believe that if you're here, it was like, it's hard to say it was your choice, because over there, it's like you're not you. But anyway, this is what's meant to be, you could say. And so just enjoy it. And you can be really, really, really grateful for all the bad, shitty things, because those things really help you be here and really help you feel like you are you. Because when you go to that apathetic place, I don't know too many people who are that apathetic and they're truly spiritual in quotation marks. It's more like
Mhm.
they're apathetic because it's a reaction to other things that are slightly lower. It's more like a depression, you
Mm,
know.
I see. It makes sense.
I think that's a good place to end for right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.